Is about how original source material becomes a movie. And I say original source material because it's not always a book, right?
Yeah.
Can you think of other things other than books that have become movies?
Stories.
True stories.
Stories, or, yeah, true stories, nonfiction, definitely.
Video game stuff.
Huh?
Video game stuff.
Video games are becoming movies these days.
Rides,
Yeah.
like the Haunted Mansion.
Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean,
Yeah.
they have become movies. All right, so a lot of things.
Mythology?
Mythology has definitely become movies. Scripture has become movies. There's all kinds of scripture. So, yeah. So you got almost everything that I had up there. All right. A novel like Scythe can become a movie. An autobiography, we've seen those become movies before. Nonfiction, you mentioned. Comic books probably are responsible for the biggest movies around these days. Scripture, plays often are turned into movies. Amusement park rides, video games, and even other films inspire future films. We're going to do, I think, Newsies as one of our plays.
We are.
Okay.
The spring one.
And that became a movie as well. Anybody know what Persepolis is about right there in the center? That's a graphic novel. We have it here in the library.
Is it about Persephone?
No. Well, it's about how women are mistreated in Iran, and they don't have many rights. All right, so how does it happen? Well, the first thing is you get an option agreement that's signed. So you get contracts signed. And if somebody signs that, they have an exclusive. That means nobody else can make the movie, but they only have temporary rights to produce it. So, like if you wrote a famous novel and somebody was going to do the movie, you'd sign an option agreement with them, but only for a limited amount of time. Why do you think that's usually around 12 months or 18 months?
They can't just like sit there with it and never do anything.
Exactly. You know, they get busy, these movie producers and everything, and they get other ideas turned in, and they might just put it on a shelf. And if they have exclusive rights that go on forever, then your book might never be made into a movie. So that's why they limited that. There's usually an option payment. So if you're a novelist, you know, you might get paid something just to sign that agreement, which is nice. Then you work to get a screenplay written, talk to directors and actors, you take it to a movie studio, start to raise money, and then you do what's called exercising your option, all right? And that's when you sign the final contract to actually make the movie. So it's a big process, and sometimes it can take many months to do that. So what we're talking about here, guys, is how it gets started, like from a book or a comic book or even an amusement park ride to become a movie, is there are a bunch of contracts and agreements signed first. So then a group of people get together and they visualize, all right? We know what it's like in the book, but what does it look like in a movie? And they'll sit around tables like this and they'll just throw out ideas. So that's usually the producer, and the producer is the one who has most of the money, and then some writers. And they talk about the script and what that's going to look like, what they want the picture to look like, maybe what colors, where it's going to be set, where they could shoot it, all that kind of stuff. Then they start to do some research. Yes? Question?
No. I just want to say, like the visual, so like the people that like visualize, like the movie, they visualize like how the different scenes look, how the different characters interact, and just like how the story would play out.
Yeah.
On the screen.
Exactly. Because it's an entirely different thing, right?
Yeah.
You're not using as much as your imagination.
From just writing it down in a book.
That's right. That's right. It's very different because you're not relying on just your own imagination. You're putting it up there. So things like costumes, things like what actors should play this part, you know, they'll start throwing that around. So that's part of the visualization. And then they do their research and they write an actual outline for how to get started with things. And they do what's called a log line, which is like a short story, or it's even shorter than that. It's maybe one sentence that they can use to take to people who have a lot of money and say, here's what this movie's about. Are you interested? I can get you more information. So they work on that, and then they do the treatment. The treatment is actually before the screenplay. That's like a short story. So you're taking this big novel, like Scythe, it's about 300 pages, and you want to make it like 4 or 5 pages. And the reason you do that, a treatment, is so that people who have money can read that and say, yeah, I'd invest some money in that. I think that's going to be popular. If all those things go well, question?
This isn't really about the book, but
Okay.
do we take notes on this?
It's up to you. I don't know what your math teachers want you to do.
I
But you're
will
gonna have
help
to
you
turn
with
it-
that, just keep listening, okay?
Okay.
All right.
After all that kind of brainstorming, you guys do some of this when you write a paper or you do a project. You might write down and sketch out on paper what you're going to do first. Then you actually hire a screenwriter and maybe a storyboard artist. You know what storyboards are?
It's like drawings of what like each shot in the movie is gonna look like.
Exactly. So it's like, it almost looks like a comic book.
Yeah.
And it's each shot in the movie, and it saves a producer and a director money, because if they have all this kind of sketched out, when they get into a studio and they're paying all these actors and lighting people and cameramen to be there, they don't waste time trying to say, okay, let's try this, let's set up this way. They have a storyboard that tells them exactly what each shot should look like, where the camera should be, and how it will move, and all that sort of thing. Considering all these things, looking at all that up there, how long do you think it takes from the time a producer says, yeah, I want to option that book, I want to pay this author money, and I've got 18 months to kind of get it together?
Probably at least 5 months.
At least, yeah. And usually they use almost all of those 18 months just to do these things. All right, so that's even before a director's hired, actors are hired, all that kind of stuff. All this kind of work goes on in the background. That's why sometimes when you have a book that you really like, and you keep saying, when's it going to be a movie? When's it going to be a movie? Sometimes it gets delayed like this. And these are the reasons. So this is the screenwriter here, and what the screenwriter does. But finally, after all this is done, and they hire somebody to actually write the dialogue, and not only the dialogue, but the camera directions, the lighting directions. They do the script for the movie. That's the screenwriter. So dialogue, characters, storyline. A lot of screenwriters are experts or specialize in one genre, like the horror genre. If you like horror movies, there are probably certain screenwriters that are hired to do most of those, because they know what scares people. They know how to draw up directions for that. It's a love story. There are certain screenwriters that you might hire for that. And if you're a Hollywood bigwig, a producer, you know who these screenwriters are. Yes?
So, a screenwriter is someone that you, so screenwriters are people that allow you to visualize how each scene will play out.
That's right. Yeah, they almost have the blueprint for how the movie's going to be made. Now, the director can change his mind, and the director ultimately will be the one who makes those decisions. But they will use that screenplay that will have camera directions, lighting directions, and camera angles, where you want to set up the camera for this shot. They will do all that and make those suggestions, so that when the director starts and has hired everybody that he wants to be in the movie, once they're there, they'll follow that screenplay. All right, so to be a screenwriter, you're not only just a good writer, but you have to know how cameras work and lighting works. You have to be able to write realistic dialogue for people when they're talking to each other, all that kind of stuff the screenwriter knows about. So it's rare, but it does happen. Sometimes the author of the book will write the screenplay. But that doesn't happen very often because you have to have all this technical knowledge about what can and can't be done with cameras and lighting and all that kind of stuff. So what's going on with Scythe as far as all this goes? Is it going to be made into a movie? Well, I found this wiki called Art of the Scythe, which is about how the thing is moving actually from book to movie. And so far, this is what's on this blog. Neil Schusterman, he's the author of the book, is involved as a producer. So he gets some say in all this. All right, he has signed an agreement. They hired a writer back in 2020, but that writer dropped out. Then they hired a new screenwriter. Have any of y'all seen the movie It or Annabelle?
I've seen it.
Yeah?
Is
Okay,
that the
well,
one about the clown?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they hired the same guy who wrote the screenplays for those movies to do the screenplay for this. All right? So that sounds pretty good. And, you know, maybe you can start visualizing what this movie would look like based on those movies. All right? In 2022, it was announced that the script had gone through a whole lot of different drafts and that Steven Spielberg was managing the product under his movie production company called Amblin Entertainment. And Spielberg, of course, did things like Jaws and Lincoln and E.T. and Raiders of the Lost Ark, so he's huge. All right, so to think that he's in control of this project gives you a lot of hope. In 2023, though, they announced that 2 new writers were working on the screenplay. So something's going on there. I don't have a lot of the details. Either Steven Spielberg didn't like what the first couple of writers were doing with it, or they had disagreements with somebody else that was helping with the movie. I don't know what happened there, but you can see there are 4 different writers who have been trying to turn this into a movie so far. And then just this year, in March, it was announced that it's not going to be a movie at all, that it's going to be a TV show instead on Universal. So I don't think that's necessarily bad news. That could be good news because you can probably think of some TV shows that have 8 or 9 episodes that do a lot more than a 3-hour movie can do, all right, with the work. So that could be what's in the work. Maybe it's going to be a mini-series. We also know what about this book that might make sense to have it be a TV series. What do you know about this book? There's 2 characters, yeah. But what comes after this book?
2 other books.
There are 2 other books.
Yeah.
All right, there are
And
series.
like, and then like there's like a bunch of mini arcs throughout the book. Like there's like the first part where the main 2 characters like learn from the same Scythe, and then their first teacher dies and they get put under 2 different sides.
So why would TV be better than a movie for all that? I think you're onto something.
Well, cause just like cause like you could put more like stuff in the TV show rather than the movie.
Yeah, because you've got maybe if it's say it's 8 episodes, an hour each, you have 8 hours instead of most movies are about 2 or 2.5 hours. So you have to cut out less.
Yeah.
If you do that. So yeah. Other questions so far? So that's where this is right now. I've looked, and maybe you guys can look too on the internet and see if you can figure out more. This is the latest news I have about where this is as far as being adapted to TV or movies. Anybody have any more information than that? I'll show you an older interview, the last part that I have here is an interview with the writer. I skipped it. All right, and this is, he's talking about a lot of things here, but we're just going to watch the last 3 minutes. This guy who's interviewing him. is talking about lots of things having to do with this novel and follow-ups and that kind of stuff. But then he starts talking about turning it into a movie for about 2 or 3 minutes. And I thought we'd finish with that because you may have never seen him speak before and who he is. And I think he has some interesting things. Now, this was a couple of years ago before they decided to make it into a TV series and all that kind of stuff. So some of it's a little outdated, but some of it I think is still pretty interesting to watch.
Send your fandom attacking a studio because that can backfire. You know?
Well, it sounds like the thing that fans should do is read the books again and wait patiently.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So they're talking about how long it's taking.
You know, I'm not hoping it'll happen.
With any of these projects, when I know you're actively involved, certainly with Game Changer and some of the others, and you have the experience. You're not writing screenplays. You're writing books. The experience is the book that you created. Is a movie just sort of, well, that I hope it works out, but either way, the book will still exist, or do you want to be involved and make that the best possible representation? How do you feel about your work being adapted?
Well, I do want to be involved, but I don't necessarily always want to write it because there's just not enough time in the day. I mean, there were points at which I was attached to write projects, and I ended up being the bottleneck. I slowed the project down because I had so many other things to work on. So I don't want to be the person who is preventing the project from moving forward. And if there's writers and director who is excited about it and passionate about it, yeah, I'm fine to sit back and let them do their thing. I just want to be involved. I want to be able to sit on the set. I want to be able to give my comments and notes. And then there are the ones that I feel like I want to write, or at least I want to have the first shot at writing. You know, I wrote the first draft of Challenger Deep, and then they went on and they hired Will McCormick to do a new draft. You know, he's an Academy Award-winning writer, and I'm thrilled to have him involved. Wrote the first draft with my son Jared of Dry for Paramount, and they felt that it needed to be bigger because, you know, in order to make it a theatrical release, it had to have this sense of size and explosions and plane crashes and all of that stuff. And so they brought in Jason Fuchs, who wrote Wonder Woman, to do a revision of the script that really made it a studio project. Had no problem with that. You know, it's whatever it takes to get it made. And, you know, I've heard a lot of authors who will complain about their books being made into terrible movies. Yeah, but every single book that gets made into a movie ends up becoming a bestseller. And then people will say, well, the book was better than the movie. Well, that means that they read the book. So on one level, I see TV shows and movies as a sales tool for the book. You know, I'd love to have a fantastic movie made or a fantastic TV show made from my books, but I'll settle for a bad one.
It's a mediocre movie version is still going to sell a lot of books and introduce people to your work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll buy that. I read Congo by Michael Crichton because I couldn't believe that the book would be as bad as the movie. I don't know.
All right. So that's it. That's a little insight into how things get made into movies. You can tell by that interview there that he's a little tired and disappointed that it has taken as long as it has. But in the end, he says it's important that it gets made because more people will read the book if it gets made, even if it's a bad adaptation.
Have you guys ever read a book because of a movie that you saw? Which ones?
Hunger Games.
Oh yeah, good example. Yeah,
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Yeah.
So you read Harry Potter after seeing the movies?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
What'd you like better?
I like the books better, just because they went more in depth.
I agree. I think
Yeah.
the books are usually
The books
better.
are so much better.
Not always, but usually.
Percy Jackson, I think that was one too. Did anybody read the books?
Not much of a book.
Movies? Yeah. And some people really, they enjoy the movie experience. So.
Yeah.
Well, this was really interesting. Dr. Zoller, thank you so much. Let me reiterate, we have a lot of math teachers here, so you need to make sure you have clarity on the expectation for the reflection piece, okay? It's 300 words. You follow a outline. The outline is spelled out for you here. Very simple. If you need a refresher, you can go back and check out the link. It'll be posted within 24 hours. Your math teacher may have a specific due date, okay? There is a due date on this piece of paper, but again, you need to check with your math teacher because I've heard different due dates from different math teachers. This should be posted in your Rockspace math course, okay? And if you have more specific questions other than what this answers, please go talk to your math teacher. But I do know that this is a math requirement, and math is a hard class. So you don't want to miss this grade, okay? Especially if you're kind of inclined to being a writer and you're not inclined to being a mather, this would really help your grade, right? All right, any other questions or comments? Well, I tell you, 19 people, Dr. Zoller, you're winning.
Oh,
He just
Do I get a
booted me
bonus?
off the ledge because I thought I was gonna win with the attendance, but now I'm overcome.
I get a
So
bonus check for that?
you get a bonus. You get a bonus. All right, thank you guys.
Thanks for coming, guys.
King of Una, now King of